So now, as we saw, we are hiding the password from the view, but it still gets transmitted over the web, and that's a big security issue because it's saved as a plain text. Anyone that is listening for packets over the net, it's gonna be able to get that information really easy. To solve this, we will hash the password and then save the hashed password into our database. After that, when the user signs in, we decode the hashed password and compare it with the user password input. If it's good, we can move on with the authentication, and if it's not, we're gonna send the error back. Hashing passwords is a must. We should never ever save the user password in a plain text. If someone grabs hold of your database, they would have access to everyone's password. And usually people, even I confess, I use the same password in most of my accounts, which I shouldn't, but most people does that. So if your database gets hacked and that password gets leaked by someone, they'll have the person's email and the person's password, which they can use to try in any other website. That probably the password is going to be the same. Anyways, so we're going to use a library called bcrypt. As you can see here on the npm, there are a few implementations for bcrypt. Bcrypt is actually built in C++, and then they ported to a few different ones. But if you use plain bcrypt, you might have problem installing because it needs a C++ compiler installed on your computer, and you might not have that. So to avoid that, we can use the bcrypt.js, which is the same, but it's completely written in JavaScript. But it will be less performant than the C++ counterpart. Just bear that in mind. As you can see here, there's weekly downloads is 177,000. It's a very popular library. Let's install it and see how it works. I'm gonna clear my terminal and paste that command over here. Now we are going to use that library inside our model. So we need to import it. Bcrypt from JS, bcrypt from bcrypt.js. So we import it, and this is what we're going to do. We're gonna hash password before save to the database. Mongoose has some lifecycle hooks that we can use to create our functions. One of them is the pre that we're going to use now, and you have post. What they do is something that you can a function that you can create, and you, for example, user schema.pre, and here you create a function that, for example, it's gonna save before save, and then we can pass the function we're going to what is it that you're going to do on this function. So basically, here we are going to use the pre Mongoose life cycle. So before we save, we're going to do this async, and we call it function. Remember, it has to be the full function, and you're gonna also pass next, and explain you in a bit why is it. So first we get if this is the user is modified. First we need to check if it's modified, and then we do the password. And that's because, for example, if the user creates the password, it will be first time, of course, it's gonna hash it. But if the user changed the password, we kind of need a way to check if the password is new or not before saving. Because if you don't do this, it will hash the password only when he creates the password, when the user creates his account, not when he updates his password. So now we can do a salt, await, and then you call bcrypt and do that. Generate salt. This is a method that comes from bcrypt. And here is the salt factor. So now you're gonna call this.password, which is the user.password, and you're gonna await again, call bcrypt.hash, and then you just pass both the password and this salt. we are checking if the password is modified or being created, and then we are creating a constant. Bcrypt is generating a salt with the factor of 10, and then we are calling bcrypt again to hash the password with that salt. But for this to work, we need to use the next. We're gonna learn more about it in the middleware class. You need to tell the application to continue with your code. So the next tell Mongoose that you've done it and it can go ahead and save your data. So we call next. If the password is not modified, we just call next and be done with it. We don't need to do anything. So let's recap again. Here we are using the pre hook from Mongoose, which is gonna do stuff to your data before saving. First, we're checking if the password has been modified or not, and if it is, we're creating. We're asking bcrypt to create salt with the factor of 10, and then we are using bcrypt again to hash the password, the user password, with the salt that we created here. After that's done, we just call it next to pass it to the next function, which would be the saving. And if if the password is not changed, we just call it next, and this function won't run. So let's try it. I'm gonna save it, and I can create a new user. HTTP post /sign up. So when I press enter, my user was created. I'm getting the good information over here that we did in the previous with this function. Now if I check my database, I need to reload. There you go. My user password now has this long hashed string over here. Now in the authentication part of our application, we're gonna use bcrypt to decode this hash and compare it to the user's input. So now we have two functions in our model. So let's save our work to git cm and password hashing. I'm gonna also push it to my repository.